Hi, this is Morley, and this is the M-Wire. FEMA camps gearing up to provide necessary slave wage labor to U.S. corporations as manufacturing returns to America. Read your history and learn. You can't have a significant manufacturing base in any nation without slave labor. It was China's dirt-cheap labor and horrific worker safety and environmental practices that made China the manufacturing hub of the world over the last 40 years. But with the Trump administration now systematically severing ties with communist China, for good reason, millions of manufacturing jobs are going to be coming back to America. You didn't really think all those jobs were going to be upgraded from China's 25 cents per hour wages to upscale $25 per hour salaries in America, did you? Here's a question to ponder. Who's going to work in the U.S. factories when nearly all the entire domestic labor pool consists of hyper-privileged, unskilled, labor-adverse people who have already grown used to being paid thousands of dollars a month by the federal government to sit home and do nothing? The whiny, coddled millennials all think that they're going to be billionaires trading on Robinhood. They have no desire to work in your factories, and they don't have the skills to even handle a real factory job anyway. So where is the labor force going to come from to power to return to manufacturing in America? The answer is simpler than you think. FEMA camp labor. FEMA camps will become the work camps that provide dirt-cheap labor to politically connected corporations that pay kickbacks to politicians. In the same way the U.S. system provides slave wage labor to politically connected corporations right now, FEMA camps are gearing up to function as work camps where inhabitants are offered food and shelter in exchange for their factory labor output. Oh, you didn't know the U.S. prison system is largely for-profit, corporate-influenced slave labor work camp operation that kicks back profits to court judges? If you didn't know that, you're already way behind the curve. I don't have the time or the space to educate you here about reality. Do your homework and upgrade your knowledge, or you won't last much longer as the world's economies are engineered into a controlled demolition. Because of the pandemic and the subsequent economic implosion that was engineered more precisely than WTC Building 7, FEMA will be receiving tens of millions of new homeless in America as those citizens lose their homes due to their inability to make mortgage payments due to the COVID-19 lockdowns. This is not a coincidence. And these new displaced millions will become the slave wage labor workers who enrich politically connected corporations who are owned by the very same corrupt Democrat governors like Newsom, who have ordered the aggressive, punitive lockdowns and produced the homelessness in the first place. They are using the lockdowns to generate a low-wage labor force that will power their new democratic corporations, which are receiving huge federal grants to produce domestic products that the Trump administration deems crucial for the U.S. supply chain, such as pharmaceuticals and semiconductors. Did you see the recent news on Kodak? Massive insider trading, hundreds of millions of dollars spent in apparent financial scams, all uncovered in the days after Kodak was celebrated as a new domestic manufacturer of pharmaceuticals. Big government money on the line. Lots of profit taking from insiders who are as connected as Trump unleashes trillions of dollars to pump up domestic manufacturing. A long list of powerful corporations stand to collect billions of dollars each. All they need is cheap labor to run the factories. Are you catching on yet as to how this scheme really works? You can't have a manufacturing base in any nation when you're paying $15 an hour plus benefits to a relatively well-off class to workers. To produce products that generate large profits for the corporations, you have to include slave labor class of people, and you need millions of them, and you're going to migrate any serious amount of manufacturing from China to the United States. You need work camps, in other words. Conveniently, the globalists built and released a biological weapon that killed just enough people to allow the media to push a mass panic way beyond any science-based concern, allowing malicious Democrat governors to destroy their local economies, producing millions of new homeless, unemployed, food-deprived people who will be more than happy to line up at the FEMA camps for food and shelter, where they will be given mandatory vaccines and stripped of any firearms before being processed into human resources. At any time the corporations need more workers, Dr. Fauci simply announces another outbreak that left-wing governors use to declare new lockdowns that produce another wave of evictions and bankruptcies. Instant labor pool for the FEMA camps. It's sick. It reminds me of the same way the vaccine industry creates demand for their vaccines. They simply build and release a new strain of measles or influenza and reap the windfall of profits from the predictable media hysterica. Turns every mom in America into a panicked, vaccine-seeking sheeple. Nearly every outbreak in history, in recent memory, has actually been engineered or augmented by the vaccine industry itself. And it's like Dr. Fauci who reaped the profits from their nefarious schemes. FEMA is about to become the Auschwitz of America. What you need to understand about history is that the so-called concentration camps of Nazi Germany weren't solely focused on murdering people. Many were focused on producing forced labor pools for the politically connected corporations and public works programs of the Nazi regime. As revealed in the HolocaustExplained.org, the Nazi regime first exploited labor and potential prisoners as a human resource before slaughtering those who were no longer able to contribute their labor. The Nazis started using forced labor shortly after their rise to power. They established specific Arbeitslager, labor camps, and housed Osterbeater, Eastern workers, Farmbeater, foreign workers, and other forced laborers who were forcibly rounded up and brought in from the East. These were separate from the SS-run concentration camps where the prisoners were also forced to perform labor. They used forced labor when it first began to grow significantly in 1937, and rampantment caused labor shortages. The invasion of the Soviet Union in June 1941 further heightened demands on the war economy and in turn for labor. At the same time, the invasion brought thousands of potential new workers under Nazi control. These prisoners were called Osterbeater, Eastern workers, and Fremarbeiter, foreign workers. The Nazis deported these people to forced labor camps where they were forced to produce supplies for the increasingly strained war economy or in construction efforts. By 1945, more than 14 million people had been exploited in the network of hundreds of forced labor camps that stretched across the whole Nazi-occupied Europe. You see, they just weren't being lined up and gassed to death. They were being exploited for their labor to power to the German factories and production hubs. This irrefutable fact is conveniently forgotten by nearly all. The corporations that rule the world have always exploited circumstances to force people into work camps of one kind or another. And today's Bayer Corporation used part of the IG Farben, a German chemical conglomerate that used Jewish prisoners for medical experiments. Times have changed. Now the vaccine industry and the entire nation is guinea pigs. While Melinda Gates calls for the first round of vaccines to be given to black people first. That's progress, we're told, because Black Lives Matter. The photo from the Wiener Holocaust Library collections, if upgraded to the modern era, could just as easily depict the workers wearing Apple uniforms as they produce iPhones. All the corporations claiming Black Lives Matter don't care one bit about black lives, white lives, or any other lives. They are evil, malicious entities that exploit human lives for profit. We've all observed human history, and we've known that every industrial hub in the history of the world has relied on slave labor in one form or another. From the pre-Civil War slave plantations of America to ancient Rome and its slave labor class. The former Soviet Union relied on prison slave labor for its manufacturing might, and in China today, slave wage workers are imported from poorer countries to provide dirt-cheap labor to corporations like Apple under atrocious work conditions that resemble prison camps. Do you think Apple has managed to generate so many billions of dollars in profits? It was all generated from the sweat of slave labor camps. We also know that the corporations in America have zero ethics and zero concern for human dignity. As we've seen with big pharma vaccines and COVID-19, they will already conspire to rig clinical trials and kill people with deliberate drug overdoses in order to discredit HCQ. What Big Pharma reveals is that powerful corporations are mass murderers, and it doesn't even consider the 269 U.S. corporations that are funneling money into weapons smuggling programs to arm Black Lives Matter terrorists. The simple, horrifying truth is that U.S. corporations need millions of dirt-cheap workers, and the coronavirus lockdown just delivered the economic collapse that's going to see those millions of people pouring into FEMA camps over the next 2 years, providing all the labor the corporations need to power their exploitation factories on U.S. soil. It will be called a public-private partnership, using government-organized FEMA camp labor combined with corporate profit-taking and generous kickbacks to U.S. senators, House representatives, almost all of whom are treasonous traitors to our republic. Don't you get it yet? The United States of America is a giant for-profit corporation, and we all just use human resources to be exploited for those in power for their own selfish gain. How do you think senators like Feinstein got so wealthy over the years? And by the way, I should probably mention that the COVID-19 lockdown training is nothing more than FEMA prison camp normalization, so you get used to having your life completely controlled by authoritarian tyrants who demand total control over your movements, your speech, and your body. What do you think they're ordering people to wear masks while on Zoom conferences? It's all about indoctrination for work camps. Just to get your brain used to being ordered around even if it makes no real sense at all. This is why you should strive to live within your means and get out of all debt, because if you end up living in a FEMA camp, there are two outcomes that they have in mind for you: slave wage labor for the corporations or extermination, depopulation. I thank you very much for coming along to my video. I'd like to thank all my new subscribers. You know who you are. I appreciate you. And please like, comment, share, and subscribe. I'd greatly appreciate that. God bless you all.